it was the whole country looking at one book. Like, you were curious about mental health, you only had one thing to look at. It was that mental health book, the DSM. Well, nowadays, what if I was 13-year-old today trying to figure out about mental health and I know nothing about it? I'd most likely do a Google search and then find 20,000 different articles, which half of them are wrong. The other half is going to push you in the wrong direction.
What is going on, guys? My name is August.
And I'm Ulyss.
And welcome to Ask Why Podcast.
Episode 1.
So today we have planned the evolution of mental health. Not like the type of stuff you hear in school, but like more or less how like it is evolved in society and stuff like that.
Yeah, throughout time from like who figured out about mental health a little bit and how did it come to where we are today and how is it evolving and is it in the right place and going in the right direction? So we kind of want to analyze the situation a little bit.
Yeah. Also, we feel like the point of view of two 20-year-olds is pretty different from people that are like 40, 50 who have had a different experience in life and everything that's grown up around us, like technology and stuff. So, you know, there's some different factors in our lives compared to theirs. So we feel like it's worth a shot.
To go back a little bit, mental health has definitely come a long way. Yeah. Like back, I did a little bit of research, and in most places, people that were mentally ill were really poorly treated and even considered to be witches and put in dungeons and tortured to get rid of those mental illnesses. However, not everywhere. Like some places were, they didn't see them as demons and whatnot, but if they weren't dangerous, the mentally ill were not like tortured and whatnot.
Yeah, well, like way back, like you could tell the, I mean, I don't even know if it was, I guess, government, but like you tell them, hey, my neighbor's doing some weird stuff in the house, screaming and stuff, and then it'd be put on a witch trial. So like,
well, they didn't have any like research and whatnot, so you just have somebody having a manic episode and you don't have anything to relate it to. You don't have any of those research and evidence we have today. So like, yes, you think they're insane and you lock them up for the safety of people, which is messed up in a way, but it makes sense if you're trying to
in a 1600s
you're just trying you're just trying to protect society. Like if there's a crazy person you don't know, like you don't have anything to label them, then you just protect.
It's good to know where our understanding has come from.
Yeah, exactly. And it's come a long way.
Oh yeah. So like, when was like the first thing that was like published about like mental health and mental illnesses?
The first published thing was in 1883. It was a German psychiatrist. He published a system of disorders. So he had a bunch of disorders and analyzed all their symptoms and whatnot and kind of wrote down his own way. Yeah. But it wasn't really, it was published, but not very official.
So if that wasn't the first published thing, what was?
The first published thing about mental health was with Clifford Beers. He recently graduated college. And so it's when his brother died that he had his first bipolar episode, that we would call it now bipolar episode. And following that episode, and the death of his brother, he tried to take his own life by jumping out of the third-story window of his building. So he was seriously injured but still alive. So he ended up in a hospital in Connecticut for the next 3 years. And this is where, so he did a little bit of research before. He was aware of mental health not being labeled. And as soon as he was locked up for those 3 years, he was hit with a wall. Like he realized how hard and how poor the treatment of people with mental health were given, and that's when really it became a thing. So it was one point during when he was locked up, he was placed in a straitjacket for 21 consecutive nights because he was having a bipolar episode. So 21 nights you're just being tied up, and you don't have, and that's not a time where you can just get out and sue the government and whatnot. That's just like, he realized how shitty it really was.
You got to think like the fact that it's a common fear to be, you know, that story where like, oh, I'm completely mentally healthy, but I was put in a mental asylum.
I did not.
I mean, not me or not. Like, I don't know. That is a real story. Obviously, that's happened a bunch of times, but that's the fact that is a common fear. Yeah. I think shows also that mental asylums weren't the best they could be.
Oh, they almost
And
the worst they could be. Like, yes, in a way, they were doing the best they can at the time to protect like society from crazy people.
yeah,
They're not crazy now. We know.
people are scared to go to the hospital, but people are much more scared to be going to an
Yeah,
asylum. So
and now I don't really know how they work and who's put in a straitjacket or whatnot. But
well,
after,
now it's become a lot more humane,
yeah,
because before it was just like there's something wrong with this guy. Just try to keep him as much in the shadows as you can to
yeah,
keep the
yeah. No, at first when people were seen as demons, they were literally executed for being
the
witches and whatnot.
electroshock therapy, like you
Exactly.
name it.
Well, that came after.
That was
Electroshock
yeah.
therapy came after. Mental health became more labeled. Then they were like, that was the first couple things that they try to, before medication and whatnot, they try to fix those people with mental illnesses. Yeah, so as soon as he became aware of how poor the system was for treating people with illnesses, as soon as he was released from the institution, and after taking a second to realize how the poor treatment of people with mental illnesses, it was in 1908 he published his first autobiography. It was called A Mind That Found Itself,
Hmm.
which was the first like social thing that was seen throughout the United States, but it was seen like it was the first time something was published about mental health that everyone really talked about, and it
Yeah.
became the first thing where people like, read the book, talked about it. It was on the news when people really became aware of this topic.
Is it still like relevant nowadays? Like in terms of
Well, now we have
does
more
it have some good
recent,
findings?
yes, but we have more recent studies. A year after that autobiography he wrote on February 19th, 1909, so a year after, beers with now a new guy, a philosopher called William James, and a psychiatrist called Adolph Mayer, they all came together and created the National Committee of Mental Hygiene, which is later called the National Mental Health Association, and we know today as Mental Health America.
Mhm.
So that is what created the DSM-5. Do you know what DSM is?
I do not.
That is pretty much a book that has all the mental illnesses we know about with the label, symptoms, and everything associated with it. So it is pretty much a dictionary of mental health.
Yeah.
Somebody comes into an institution and that's how they analyze people. So the DSM, there's 5 versions. The 5th one is the most recent one. And it was updated. So the DSM-5 came out in 2018 when the last DSM-4 came out in 1993. So it took 25 years for the new episode, or for the new
version to come
between
out.
DSM-4 and DSM-5.
Yeah.
It took 25 years for it to come out.
Yeah.
So that was a really, really big like change, and it was a lot of interesting research, but it also took 25 years. Like that's a
Yeah.
long time.
Well, when you think about how complex mental health is in general, like
Absolutely.
it's not something you can analyze by having, there's 80% of this level and it should be at 75%. This guy is probably depressed. Like it's there's so much more of a gray area and labeling stuff that I think the funnel to have an actual clear understanding about mental health is dwindling, but it's still
No,
very
you're
much
totally right.
general.
They didn't have the technology to do whatever research and testing that we have today.
Yeah.
Like nowadays we have more computers and technology that allows us to make
Yeah,
research
we're
like
getting
that
more and more
studies.
specific and in
Exactly.
depth into our brain and what goes on in that little thing in there.
Exactly.
So what happened after the DSM-5 was released?
Yeah, so after those 25 years of studies and research, they came out DSM-5. And the next thing, pretty much, that DSM-5 or DSMs overall was something that was like formal. It wasn't some guy writing research. It was people that came together. It was an institution. It was something that became big. So it wasn't really something you could ignore. Like people now had to, it wasn't really a choice. It became a thing. So people had to become used to it. And it was the next move, well, not the only one, but the next big move was 3 states. They approved mandatory mental health curriculums. It was in 2018. New York and Virginia passed legislation that made mental health instruction mandatory in public education. So that's why today most schools in those states that is mandatory. So it is you go to school and you are given those classes and are taught about it.
Oh, it's teach, it's not like treatment?
No, it's being taught in school. It's education.
Okay.
This correlated with the CDC reporting 30% increase in U.S. suicide numbers over the last 20 years. So it's funny, as soon as it became into school and it became part of education for people to be taught about mental health, it increased suicide rates by 30%.
Oh, wow. So after that got passed and there was an increase in suicide, what happened?
So it wasn't until the governor of Virginia had trouble with his own son that had suicidal behavior, and he took it upon himself to make a bigger change because he didn't want to see his own son. If his own son was going through things like that, that meant other people and families had the same situation.
Yeah, same thing. Once again, it gets put in your life, and all of a sudden it becomes an actual issue.
Yeah, so they wanted to figure out a way to still educate people, but in a better way. And their solution they found was, it was in July 2019. The Florida's Board of Education made it mandatory to have 5 hours of mental health classes from grades 6 through 12. So that was the backlash of the 30% increase in suicide rates.
I didn't realize how recent this was. I thought this was maybe like 10, 20 years ago.
No, this is why this is somewhat interesting to us too, is that we are not guinea pigs at all, but in a way, like,
we're the generation that's like going through it.
Yeah, prior generations didn't have much education like throughout school and whatnot about such topics, so we are the first ones to see where it goes to somewhat, because it became really a thing around 2019, around that time, where it became mandatory in classes. So that's why we had those classes. But I don't know if you realize it became more and more of a thing. Like when we passed from middle school to high school to college, it became, for me in middle school, it wasn't really a thing. It became, I think, a year or two into high school, it became more of a thing.
Well, I was just thinking it might be just us growing up and having deeper conversations with the people around us. But to me, it seems like I have a lot of friends and a lot of people going through a lot of shit. So like, to me, it feels like it is getting a little bit more common, but that could be just
I think it's a combination of both. We are
little shielded vision.
Yeah, we are widening our vision and becoming more aware of such problems, but at the same time, we are the first generations to be given that type of education for mental health. Like our parents and even people between our parents and us are never given that type of education and became aware of such concepts through reading news and whatnot, but they weren't giving those classes in school.
It feels like the intervals of like when something life-changing comes out, it feels like it's getting shorter and shorter.
It really depends how you utilize all the information you have online and whatnot. Back in, like when the DSM-4 and prior DSMs were released, it was the whole country looking at one book. Like you were curious about mental health, you only had one thing to look at. It was that mental health book, the DSM. Well, nowadays, what if I was 13-year-old today trying to figure out about mental health and I know nothing about it? I'd most likely do a Google search and then find 20,000 different articles, which half of them are wrong. The other half is going to push you in the wrong direction and teach you about information you weren't really looking for. So that's how, I think that's my opinion on how things is not becoming as clear, is because you just have so many different pathways you can go to.
There's so many, you have so much access to so many different point of views.
And nothing is concrete. Like you're not going to find the one website about mental health, like unless you go to a particular institution about.
We can't even, as humans, we can't even agree on if the earth is round or flat. So like we're not going to.
Well, some can, some smarter than others can't agree the earth is flat.
That's just to show that like you'll always find something saying the other answer. So like even if what you're looking at is true, you're always going to see the other information that's completely opposite to it, and you won't even know it's true because you always feel like there's some smarter people, and unless you're one of those people, you're gonna feel like a little bit
no, you're so right,
a little bit victimized by that.
So that's pretty much the history throughout today, very vaguely in a very easy way to explain it, but that's how we've gone to where we are today.
It shows how long it took. That's what shocks me most.
25 years for one edition to come out. I think that's crazy.
It feels like the biggest things that have happened, like I don't want to give a percentage, but like half of the biggest things that have the developments that have come feel like they're in the last like 20 years.
Yeah, and even like the past, it came out, DSM-5 came out in 2019 or 2018. Like it's been 3 years since, and I feel like so much has changed in the
Yeah.
past. So much research, studies, and different stuff has been done in the past 3 years that I find it crazy that it took 25 years for something like that to come out.
So I really want to talk about this, the stigma in mental health, and how
Yeah.
like ignorance is bliss sometimes when you have mental health, and just knowing what's possible and what's out there for how bad things can get.
Yeah. Develop that more a little bit. What do you mean by stigma around mental health?
Well, I mean, like, how people think about it, and how, for one, like, knowing what's out there also causes you to think that that could apply to you. And yeah, just overall, like, how is it bad to tell people too early on about what that is? Is it bad that we have so much information available out there that it can lead us to think too drastically sometimes?
Well,
what do you think about it?
it's hard when you start a movement like that. It's hard to really know where it's going to go. So I think the intention of the overall movement is something that's positive and it's making positive impacts. But you can't control everything, and there's always going to be negative sides in a way. Like, if everyone knows about specific things, then yeah, more people are likely to feel connected to such a topic that doesn't even apply to them. But you can't not give that exposure, because at the same time, like, people need to
It's
know.
necessary, of course.
So the balance, I think, is just between, like, around what age we, or society as a whole, exposes people to such a topic.
Yeah.
So I think high school is a little too early, but at the same time, that's when you find who you are in a way, and that's when you're really maturing and going through puberty. So it would be selfish in a way not to provide people around that age that information.
The thing is, with, like, the way we present things, and the way the system is now, where, like, you're a kid, kindergarten and up to, like, 5th grade, I'd say, you're literally just being a kid most of the time. You start learning basic stuff, but there's no, like, serious.
Well, no, when you're younger, definitely before high school, I don't think this should be introduced to anyone. Like,
Yeah. But I was thinking, like, more on the side of, like, how fast you're introduced to things starting from high school. Like, the amount of things that you learn in a short amount of time compared to, like, the 12 years you have before middle school. 'Cause middle school is kind of like a transitional phase, but I guess I do also think that it's nothing compared to high school.
Yeah,
in terms
you
of
don't
how
need to expose someone that young to such information.
But maybe the amount of time that you give high schoolers stuff to figure out is a little too short to be safe, or, like,
I see
healthy.
what you mean. I think it should be introduced then in middle schools, like, slightly, like, I guess, just being aware of your feelings, that some people,
it shouldn't be like a diagram, like, like, depression hits a quarter of the people in the world, and you're probably gonna have it.
That's
look at your friend to the left, look at the friend to the right, and
welcome to middle
look at the person
school
in front of you, and one of you four have depression.
One of you four is gonna have depression. Good luck. No, that's definitely not the way to approach. But I think there's a right balance to find between, first of all, there is right and wrong information you can give to people about such topics. So I think there's definitely some things that need to be kept for a while. I think it'll come over time to have better education for people in schools and whatnot.
One of the things we saw recently in that video by Veritasum, he talks about learning styles and how different kids have different ways of learning, whether it's observational, auditory. And so in that video, the fact that we created that, like, a sense of learning, a unique form of learning, and that there's so many different ways, like, you're not fully an observational learner, sometimes you're a little auditory, like, it shows that also when you teach mental health, which, as a parallel, you try to teach that to someone, they're going to have different reactions depending on how they learn as well. So it's also very hard to to make a standard for what you teach if you know that, like, people can react different ways, and especially with something so delicate. I think it's very hard.
We're talking about the brain here. It's like a changing muscle that we don't even know completely about. It's still mysterious to, even throughout research, whatever brain research, it's still very vague. So it's very hard to create concrete things to teach people because we don't even know much of it. Yes, we have those symptoms of whatever mental illnesses, but they are very different for each individual. It depends. So a lot of times, we can create an overall like symptom to label someone with a specific mental illness, but I think you're right. It might be dangerous to put that in school. I'm not sure at what age you become able to filter the information given to you and make whatever you think of it, because I think whatever age, and it's different for everyone, that's why it's tricky again, but when you get to an age when you're able to receive information but filter it yourself and only take in what you need and without letting like other information affect you negatively, then I think that's the age. And I think that
there's a lot of stuff to keep in mind in order to, like, because we always try to aim for like the best result and especially an accurate result. So when you have so many different factors affecting that, like guy, girl, emotional level,
I don't think
intelligence, like
us two are going to be able to find the solution to such a topic.
We're not gonna be the trendsetters on that. It's interesting to think about, and it's interesting to put into perspective like how different we are and how different we take in all these things, and also how important it is and why this is such a massive thing in our day-to-day life that sometimes often goes pretty neglected.
So I think the direction is going school-wise and educating people in school is the right direction, definitely. It's not perfect, and it might be too early and too much information, and also depends on the teacher giving you the information, like however they present it to you, you know?
Yeah, I was gonna say, now that we have so much like implications on education and educating kids early on this, I think like you and me, there's definitely gonna be some kids that got hit by psychology and the idea of psychology, and a few years from now there's going to be a lot more people studying it, a lot more research coming out with everything.
I think psychology overall as a subject is making really big changes.
I think it's going to move very fast very soon. As a teacher, you know that you need to teach a kid specific things. When you have to teach them math, you know that there's no possible way that like maybe he doesn't get it, but like there's no way that it'll affect him mentally. There's no way it'll affect his future.
Well, actually,
I mean, like, you know what I meant, like on a certain level, like you're not worried about the consequences of teaching him the Pythagorean theorem, whereas you're teaching them about something pretty serious and something that could very much be relevant to them in the future. You got to be a little bit more delicate with it, and also a lot more careful with the information you give them.
Yeah, there's many different parts of the stigma. Part of it is not knowing how to educate people, but also people need to become more comfortable talking about mental health and talking about, for example, us, if we were back in high school right now and one day you actually felt the need to talk to not a therapist at school, but a counselor, and getting the extra support you need to be that person to actually do it and push people to do it. Yeah. So it becomes not something people are judges you for or something like that.
We've talked a lot about school, like how school goes about mental health and all that. But I think the school is like obviously a big part in your education. But I personally think that your parents are the biggest influence on who you become in the future. That is true. I think that they could also be a much more subtle gateway to teaching kids about mental health and also having that conversation. And
you're absolutely right, but that's something you're not going to go like tell somebody's parents they're not teaching their kids the right way, and you can't supervise what is being taught from parents to kids when like on a school system it's like it's stuff that's written down or
it's a rule. It's like schools apply what the board tells them to do. And the board is ruled by the government that has specific programs that they need.
But that's regulated in a way that like you can't like
Johnny
at school, you can't see what his parents are teaching him, and there's no way to, even if you did know what they were teaching him, that is no one's place to change the way somebody's parents is raising their kids. Like they do whatever they want.
Obviously it's harder to like enforce the fact that your kids are going to be taught that.
But you're right.
But
should be.
As like in terms of like a beneficial way of learning about those things, I think parents are 100% more useful and
Yeah,
more
and it's
direct
something you
in terms
trust
of
more.
teaching. Yeah, it's more like comfortable, and it's not like
Absolutely.
it's not just learning it from a textbook. Hey, these statistics about mental health.
No,
It's
you
more
bring
like,
up a really good point. I think parents is one of the like best way to educate your kids in
and
that way.
that could be something that builds like as a social etiquette. Like
Yeah.
nowadays, you know that your parents teach you the birds and the bees and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Like that could be a very common thing that we haven't taken in yet, but something that could come a few years
I
from now.
think you actually just reached something. I had never thought about it that way, but yeah, your parents teach you manners, teach you about
They teach you
everything.
a lot of
I think in
important-
future generation, that would be something important is for parents to teach their kids about mental health. And it's even better because parents know how their kids work. Usually they understand their kids better than a teacher would.
Yeah,
and
your kids go to school and it's a social aspect, but your parents are the ones that teach you how to react in that social aspect.
Exactly.
Even though school has like all that interaction, your parents are the
a
ones
teacher
that
has what, like 30 kids or 20, or it
Yeah.
doesn't matter, and he can't have a teaching style that's appropriate for every single person. And what if one of those students had some trauma or something that he feels sensitive about? That teacher can't know about every single student, and he can't make it like a lesson that's appropriate and that's going to reach everyone the same way. When if it's each parent's individually teaching their kids their values about mental health and teaching them about feelings and whatnot, then it's more personalized. I think that's a really good point. And I think future generation should focus on having
that's one of those things where you're like, oh yeah, it'd be so great if everybody did their part, but like that's like everybody turning off the lights to save the planet. Like it's gonna be very hard to like.
Yes,
the thing
but then you
that'll
just
help is the conversation, and not like you'll never have.
Same thing with turning off the lights. You just have to not think of it as a whole, but do your part.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
When you get to the point of having children, be who you would want to be and teach them things about mental health at the right time and about whatever you want to teach them that's appropriate at the time.
Yeah. Parents, if your little kid comes home from school, he's 6 years old, teach him about depression. He could help him out.
I can't tell. That's a joke.
It's a joke.
Okay. Yeah.
But overall, I think mental health is developing
in the right direction,
pretty fast, and in the right direction, and it'll be interesting to see. Like, hopefully, we'll be around to see the nuances.
Exactly. But now that we're in the right direction, we gotta. Everyone as an individual has to take in whatever is right for you and not get overstimulated by the amount of information that's available to anyone.
Yeah.
So I think, everyone just do your part to educate yourself a little bit, but with a grain of salt, like
keep
don't
yourself, don't overdo it. Don't let yourself play out a fantasy that's not necessarily yours, but also never cut out the option that something's going on.
Take the extra step to ask yourself why, and then either research it, see someone about it, and then reach a good appropriate conclusion that's not don't create a scenario in your head, and
be honest with yourself.
Be honest with yourself. I think that does a pretty good overview.
I think that wraps up most of the stuff. Well, we hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Ask Why.
We're really excited to have you guys along for future episodes.
Yeah, well, we're gonna keep grinding this. We're gonna give you guys something to really want to watch. We'll keep improving. Keep in mind this is our first episode, but
and give us feedback on whatever. If it's a video version, tell us about the video. If you're listening to the podcast version, tell us what you think. Tell us about future topics you want us to talk about, and your own opinion on what things we say, and if you agree or not.
We'll see you guys in the next episode.
See you guys next Monday. Tune in to Ask Why.
Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Spotify.
Links in bio. Drop a like.
We'll see you guys next week.
Peace out.